I wanted to start off very quickly to get an idea. If I can get everybody to raise your hand very quickly and just hold it up there for a moment. How many of you, if you are not starting a company, can you put your hand down? So if you're starting your own company, or you have your own company, keep your hands up. Okay. Of those who have your hands up, it's supposed to be on this side, huh? No starters on this side. Okay. Of those of you who have your hands up, have you sold to emerging markets? Yeah, if you've sold to emerging markets, sorry, keep your hand up. Have anybody sold to Africa? Excellent. We have one person. This is usually how it comes down. Second of all, has anybody had a chance? I'm speaking into the clicker as it was my microphone. It's just out of bad habit. If you have had a chance to start a company and failed horribly, can I get somebody to raise your hand? All right, we have one person. Keep your hand down. You don't want to be embarrassed. I'm here tonight to tell you how great I am, and you will see through my wonderful presentation. All right, we started with this, and let's go. This not easy. All right, I'm going to give you a little quick story. I'm going to try to keep it to 15 minutes about how not to do a major fuck up like I did in one of my very first clients. In 2002, I started a company myself with my best friend from college. It's called, well, I'm going to keep it quiet because I'm still under confidentiality agreements. But anyway, I started a boutique M&A advisory services company for the telecom services industry, and it has a major, a hyper niche focus in satellite services. This is great. I just finished my master's degree, and I'm tackling the world. I have lots of energy. My best friend from college happens to be, in my opinion, perhaps the most intelligent person I have ever known, hands down. So, and I get to start a business with this person, so I'm really excited. Here. Does anybody understand what an intermediary does? Does anybody not understand it? How did that work? Okay, so it started a mergers and acquisitions boutique, and what we did is we helped companies perform corporate finance on both the buy side, on the sell side, as well as capital raising. And these are just some of the things that I was going to do for companies. So I helped to maximize their values, I helped to build an information memorandum, I would perform some due diligence as well as negotiate price, and try to help close the sale. I had never done this before. It was all theoretical to me, but I was smart, I can do this. Let's move forward. First client, 2002. I get a company that is basically in the telecoms industry. It is based in the United Kingdom, but it has 27 subsidiaries throughout sub-Saharan Africa. I've never been to Africa, and just to kind of get an idea for what this company did, it was a fiber optics company, and it did all kinds of really cool stuff, laid cable throughout Africa, and the people who founded it were designing a way to bring the African continent back into the 21st century, leapfrogging with all kinds of technologies, the ability to connect to the internet and use cell phone technologies. Okay. I should just go faster than I thought. So, when we get the company, they give me a quick overview of what they had achieved. This company had about £8 million in sales. It had about 3 years of implementation, and it had fiber installations across different countries in Africa, roughly 120 to 150 employees. So thinking this is actually a pretty serious company, and it is in the hands of these three founders who want to sell the company. They've been in Africa for roughly 10 years, and they've hired us because they've been trying to sell their company and return to Canada, which is where they're from. So they actually they're installing fiber optic cables throughout all these different sub-Saharan cities, and they were not having as much success as they would have liked to. And I came to them and I said, what is the problem? Why can you not sell this company? They said, Victor, come with me. So they took me throughout Has anybody here been to Nigeria? Okay. Well, if you haven't been to Nigeria, it has a special place in my heart because I've been there 27 times. And when I arrived there, it was an eye-opening experience for me. First of all, when I was walking through the town, my client asked me to go with him, and he took me to the markets. And I couldn't understand. Fiber optic technology was fantastic stuff, and I was wondering why they couldn't sell a company that was it was an innovator in Nigeria. Nigeria, I don't know if you understand, is about the size of Spain, but it has 3.5 times the population of Spain. Right now it has roughly 130 million people. Spain has 47. So as we're going through the market in Lagos, Nigeria, we come to this beautiful market that's selling all kinds of stuff. And if you haven't been there, they have livestock right next to the vases, and watches, and food, and everything. And I'm trying to figure out, again, I'm asking my client, why can you not sell this company? Well, he tells me, we've invested all this money, we put this pipe into the ground, we connect the city, the governments are happy, the banks are happy, the telecom companies are happy, everybody connects to the internet. And then it drops. Why does it drop? He takes me to this little stall here, to that one there. There we go. And he shows me these strands that are orange. I don't know if you guys know what fiber optic cable looks like. It's very thin, very pliable, and they're wonderful. And I asked him, what is that? He says, that is my product. I just spent $18 million to put this into the ground, and it's here. And they're in the strands. And do you know what the people in Nigeria were using these strands for? Any idea? Somebody guess for me.
Lamps or scarf?
Fish. Getting close. They use it to hit the cows. Fiber optic cables make a nice snap. And it is very pliable, so it is flexible, and it is strong. And when you saw all these millions of dollars going into being chopped up into small strands to hit the cows, he didn't know what to do. So the company, as you know, if you are startups, you get these things called pivoting, right? Now, Doreen, what do you see behind me? Go ahead, take a guess.
Cows.
Oh, wait a minute. What do you see behind me now?
3 different trees.
Pavel, what do you see behind me? You're a telecoms guy. Do you see trees? That's what most people saw. These are not trees. These are telecom towers. So my kind changed from fiber optic cables into telecom towers, and it had 127 employees. Do you know what 100 of those employees were for? Security. 127 employees, 100 are security to protect them from these giant tall towers. But they further diversified, and they started to put in micro-satellite dishes. If you've ever been to Africa, it's an amazing place. If you haven't gone, strongly encourage you to try it out. It is, as you might see, as soon as they started to put a few of these dishes in, it went crazy. So business was going very well. Again, I get back to why could they not sell their company if they have all these dishes all over Lagos, Nigeria? The demand just grows like crazy. There you go. Demand is growing and growing and growing, and they still can't sell this company. So they tell me, Victor, we've made money in Nigeria, we made money in Ghana, we made money in Namibia, and in Tanzania, and in Mozambique, and in South Africa. We're tired. We're now 55, 60 years old. We want to get back to Canada and enjoy what we've done with our families. And here you are. We're hiring you, because they had already tried Credit Suisse, they tried Goldman Sachs, they tried JP Morgan, and now they come to this company formed by somebody like me, who has never done this before, and my partner, who, well, he was extremely smart, and he was head of investment banking in a big London firm. And they decide, we need your help. We're so desperate, we want to sell this company for at least $3 million. We're looking to sell it for 5, but we'll accept $3 million. Yes. So these are the terms that they asked us to achieve for them. What did we achieve? Because I'm really cool, we got $10 million. More than 3 times what they asked for in terms of being able to sell their company. So here I am on my very first deal, my very first client. I've spent 6 months working on selling a company. If you don't know what an intermediary does, we make money because we charge a commission based on the transaction price. I'll be upfront with you, we were making 6% on whatever we got for the company. 6% of $10 million, you do that very quickly, $600,000. Nice fee for 6 months of work. I'm a fantastic guy, right? Uh-oh. As you might expect, something went horribly wrong. If you didn't know what Nigeria was like, in 2004, it was about to celebrate the first time it was going to transition from somebody who had been a military dictator who took over the country and was going to hand off to the next freely elected president and hand over and transition in a democratic style. Except on the day of transition, he decided he liked being president, he was going to stay being president. So here we are with, actually, we not only got, when we got the $10 million offer, we actually had 2 more clients, 2 more bids. And one of those bids was actually for $20 million. So my fee would have gone up from $600,000 to $1.2 million. And I knew when my client came to me, he was so happy that we had $10 million on offer for him, or for them, that they were going to be super thrilled that I tell them, I now have somebody who's willing to offer $20 million when they wanted 3. So what happened? Are you guys familiar with this person? Okay, I love him. He is me. We already started to do the numbers in our head of how much money we were going to make, and we already had another buyer in the process, so we might even get beyond $20 million. Let's go ahead. If you don't know Africa very well, there are 54 different African countries. These are the cities, did I go too fast? These are the cities where we had operations that I had to go by and basically do due diligence. Do you guys know what due diligence is? That's actually the best answer I've ever heard. Is going out there and making sure that these towers actually exist. We've heard that there's a lot of fraud in Africa. It's true. But if I'm from the United States, and my God, my country's packed with corruption. So I have to go out to the forests, to the jungles, to the cities, and make sure that the assets that my client claims to exist actually exist. And I had to go out to these different cities. I'd never been to Africa, and I had to do all of these on my first trip. One of the things that I had not really anticipated was the fact that immediately after my client was celebrating getting this $10 million offer, the country plunges into civil war. So I had an offer with a check in hand for $10 million, but I told my client, don't worry, we're going to be even better. We're going to have an offer for $20 million. Do not accept it. So all of a sudden, we went from being this hero to having this big $20 million offer, and the $10 million offer, and the $7 million offer go off the table. 0. And does anybody know, would anybody want to take a guess at how much we were able to sell the company for the next 6 months? 0. Absolutely 0. So here we are. I've told my very first client, that we can help them, And we've gone from offering them 10 million to nothing. And then the next year, zero. It's still in civil strife, not civil war, but civil strife, and nobody wants to put money into Africa. So they ended up starting the transition, and one of the challenges in terms of being able to be a good advisor was to judge whether or not there's a phrase in the U.S. or in English called "a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush." Are you familiar with this phrase? Then I actually had the displeasure of a number of the companies that actually wanted to buy my client, actually hired us because they thought we did a great job, and we were able to do deals with those other clients in those 27 different cities. And I still had not been able to sell my client. And I don't know how, because this was a first client, it was very symbolic for us, me and my best friend, and starting our first company. It was a very humbling feeling that we thought we knew what we were doing, and we actually totally screwed over our client. We felt terrible about it, but there is an upside to this. And this is very, I think, relatable to a lot of the startups that I see in Barcelona and hopefully here in Chisinau. That perseverance mixed with talent and just an absolute relentless desire to succeed actually ends up working. Eventually, about 4 years later, we are able to convince, and we always thought that this was the case, that our client was worth a lot more than the $10 million, and we were able to successfully close the client for $36.5 million. So for those 4 years, we were living off breadcrumbs, trying to figure out how to make sure that our clients were very successful. And in the sense that if you ever had a chance to start a company and think that you're doing very well, and all of a sudden it just hits the brakes, well, I've been there. Actually, my wife and I just relatively recently took over a company, and it is a small, medium media company, and now we're all working 100 hours a week, and it is very humbling to realize that, damn, it's hard to be an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur sucks. You work a crazy amount of hours. You want to start businesses with your best friend, and then you have fights with your best friend. And you want to build a company, and things just don't ever seem to come together. But this is one of the things that I really love about Startup Grind. So I've been with the Barcelona chapter for 4 years, and the values that it really brings to the table in terms of wanting to ask others what they need and how you can help them before you ask where you can get back, as well as don't try to make connections, build up friendships. This really has worked for me and my partners over the years, and I wanted just to thank you very much, Doreen, for building and the team that's doing this, because it's very powerful. I know it's needed in Barcelona. I hope it's doing it here. But anyway, this is my goofy story about how I helped the company, or I thought I did, and I lost a lot of money for them. But 4 years later, and literally 4 years is a very long time to come back from, because we never knew whether we would. But this is the little story that I wanted to share with you guys, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions. So thank you very much, and I'm all yours, Doreen.
Now we're going to take to the interesting part of the program. It's like questions and answers. We call this fireside chat because all the questions comes so quickly. If you're already familiar with that type of format. So now I would like to invite our second guest here. It's Horcasitas. It's the
chair. The good thing is that we don't have some fancy chairs. We can just do it.
Great.
Hi everyone. The first question is that I'm wondering is how did you enjoy the presentation, and what was a thing that did you enjoy the presentation? Okay. And was wondering if we could start more with some questions from the audience. I have some questions prepared, but would like to know if you have some questions that we would like to start with. Okay. So the first question is, you mentioned at the end of the presentation that you're working with your wife on your most recent acquisition that you're doing right now in January 2019. I was wondering if you could tell us more about the company itself and how did you end up getting involved in this?
All right. I'll try to be very quick. The company that we recently acquired is it's a magazine that serves the English-speaking expat community of Barcelona. It was founded 23 years ago, and it completely dominates Barcelona in this category, in this niche. The founders who had created the company were very good at print publication, and if Barcelona has transitioned from a country or city that spoke very little English, and when that was the case, if you wanted to do business in Barcelona, everybody advertised with this magazine. With the rise of internet, Eventbrite, meetups, all these different tools that are out there, the business model of selling only through advertising, through print publication, killed many magazines, and this one survived only because it had such a dominant position. After 18 years, basically, the families, the founders who created the company, I think were no longer in love with their product. They were tired, and they were not digital marketers. So in order to try to help rescue this company, the team, myself and 6 other people joined in to try to rescue it, and now we're converting it into a digital magazine, still with print publication, however, much more organized and adjusted for a digital marketing business.
Got it. And what do you do in the company right now?
Oh my word. We took over. It was a lot worse than we thought it was.
Okay. And what do you mean worse? I'd like to dive deep into the specific, because was it worse because it was presented to you in another way?
Oh, yes.
Or it was just looked externally like a much better company?
Well, you know, when you see a company and you don't know that the inner workings, the company is its own little world by itself. And what I had been used to was this magazine that has such a dominant position. It's very well recognized. The brand recognition is just powerful throughout Barcelona. And so it's like looking at a Ferrari, a kit car Ferrari, and then you raise the hood and there's no carburetor, there's no engine, there's no cables. The advertising policies were wrong, the commission structures were completely not followed, the accounting was terrible, and it was kind of disheartening to see something that I liked so much to be run so poorly. Another big reason that it's actually very important is my wife is a graphics designer, and she wanted to have an outlet where she could put a channel to do a lot of her creative design work onto print publication. She has digital clients, but she didn't have a regular print. So she made me promise that if we acquired this company, one, we'd rescue it from falling into oblivion, and 2, that she would have a channel for her to do this with. But a very big thing is my mentor. About 5 years ago, I took a man who I absolutely thought was a fantastic guy. I love this man. And he didn't know me, he didn't like me, and I made him my mentor. I followed him, and we have these legendary breakfasts at 5:30 in the morning once a month. And he had become the controlling shareholder of this company. But he travels around the world and had no interest in managing the company. He was just your dream investor for them. Put money into the company and just asked him to update it 3 or 4 times a year of how to improve the magazine. Well, this man is now basically my best friend in Barcelona, and I have a chance to work with him and to rescue something that he put a substantial amount of money into, and I wanted to help rescue it. And so doing this together. It is a very humbling experience, because now it's not that I don't understand, but it's one thing to advise company when you're talking about multi-million-dollar transactions, and I'm their advisor. It's another one to put that advice into practice. Very different. If you haven't run a company, or you haven't done it in a long time, you forget that marketing, when you're an entrepreneur, you're the head of marketing, you're the head of sales, you're the head of product development, you're the head of HR, and you're the big economy, the corporate cheerleader, the corporate communicator, and everybody wears these hats. And it is tiring. It is really, really tiring. And so it's been humbling to meet again, because if I can't raise this organization with the amount of money that we've already invested, it's probably not a business that should survive on its own. We're working really hard, or somebody else can do this better than I can. I've never done print publication or electronic or digital media, and so I've just jumped in 100%, and this is what I do.
Especially with your background in telecom and M&A acquisition and so on.
I have 0 experience in doing it. No.
And I believe that most of the entrepreneurs themselves have 0 experience in the field or have ever built companies, and when start with the first company, they have absolutely no experience whatsoever. on how to do marketing, sales, customer support, development of the product, and so on. But they still do this, I believe, because of a lot of passion that they share and frustrations in order to solve this exact problem in the industry or build something that they really, really believe in. And another thing that I was also wondering is that I believe since there are only a couple of entrepreneurs in the room here, you've mentioned that you are, as an entrepreneur, you're working 100 hours a week. And this is something that you're happy with, and on the other side, I'm not sure if you mentioned that you a bit regret this, that you're working a lot. How would you describe what are you doing day to day at the company? For example, this or last week.
Well, what I'm doing day to day, I'm now head of sales. So all I want to do is sales. I wake up in the morning and all I want to do is sales. I hate selling, and I don't even think I'm all that good at it. But sales makes the world go round. Doesn't matter what your company is. If you don't have sales, your company's dead. Startup or layup or corporate made monster. If you're not good at sales, everything dies. And one of the challenges is because this company was a print publication and it's gone to digital marketing, they already know us because of the print. But I have to get to convince our existing clients and new ones to buy us because of the power of digital marketing. So what I'm facing right now is the challenge of how to productize our assets and what we have to sell. And I'm struggling with this right now, how to make a good product that is sellable online.
Got it. Interesting. So I saw that there are a couple of questions that we have through the platform. Let's just look at a couple of them. So the first one that I see the most voted is someone wants to know more about your education and probably a bit more about your background.
Okay, my education. Well, I studied economics at the University of Maryland. I studied entrepreneurial finance at the Wharton School. And I studied a master's in software engineering from Johns Hopkins. So very technical stuff, but at each stage, I always studied something and then was never able to apply it at that time. The closest I ever got to applying what I actually studied was I graduated from getting my software engineering and telecoms engineering master's. And the next day I started my company that we're talking about, Satellite Services, because it focuses on telecom. But I actually never did any telecom engineering type work, never hands-on. It was always on the sales or corporate finance.
Or management part of the company itself. The next question is from the economic perspective, is it better to buy or to sell now and why? So I believe it would be best if Elena, if she can give a little bit more information on the question.
Yes, I mean, if we are anticipating any crisis in the economy, in the global economy, and is it better to buy now or to sell? Is it cheaper? It's more expensive? Like, what do businesses do usually these days?
Oh, that's a pretty big question. I'm a huge believer in you really gotta go after niche and really focus because things just don't make sense anymore. I'm from the United States. I've been a lifelong Republican, and I absolutely abhor the person who we've chosen to represent our country. And yet, the economy continues to grow. However, I also abhor debt. I don't have debt. I've never had debt. Actually, I had a lot of debt in college, and then I got rid of it quickly. The amount of debt that the United States, for example, has is astronomical. It's far worse than it has. So I talk about the United States only because that's what I know, but I've been living in Spain for 22 years. We also have this tremendous amount of debt in Spain, and when people talk to us about the level of unemployment, about the lack of skills, bad English, horrible infrastructure, immigration problems, and yet we're growing at an incredible rate, it doesn't make sense to me based on traditional criteria and rules that we've been told, Elena. At the flip side, I've been very fortunate in my life. I started this company not realizing how dangerous I put myself into certain situations in Nigeria, Ghana, Namibia. I was actually physically in danger at certain points, but I had the chance to see how people who have been held down by corrupt governments for so long, they think that this is normal for them, and what you call normal for you and is very relevant, or excuse me, very specific to your situation. I want to say I'm an eternal optimist, so I always think that there's always an upside to every situation. And I think that's actually a pretty strong requirement to be a successful entrepreneur. It's taking really nasty situations and being able to embrace them and make them better. Part of the challenge that I've had, and I want to answer your question, I'm not trying to skirt it, is basically my company, we've gone into areas where people run from. I don't run because they're running from it, but I've embraced going into Eastern Europe, Asia, Latin America, and all over sub-Saharan Africa, and it's riddled with corruption. So are so many other places. Spain is, Europe is, the United States is. Some countries I think are better at hiding it. I'm an eternal optimist, so I think things are very good right now, and I want to paint the entire country, the entire world with the same brush. You can't do that. But if you are looking to where to invest, and for very selfish reasons, I would very quickly go into Africa. I would very quickly go into China and Taiwan. And if for my own daughters, who I hope are become entrepreneurs themselves, I encourage them to go into markets where everybody else thinks is kind of screwed up and figure out, because there are diamonds in the rough all over the world. The United States as well as Sub-Saharan Africa.
So if you're saying that things are good, it means if you want to buy a business, it's going to be expensive. So unless a crisis hits in, you don't really want to spend cash.
Well, these are pretty open or broad questions. There are sectors that are very popular, and I think you have to take each market and figure out where they are. If you want to buy real estate in the United States right now, yeah, it's growing big. If there's even a slight hiccup in China, if they don't pay their debt, or Korea, people always forget, U.S. has tremendous Korean debt. We're screwed. So a small hiccup in the United States causes a big problem. On the flip side, if you want to buy real estate, that's a great place to buy. Right now, there's a huge bubble in Silicon Valley. Right, we're in a good position. I say we, Europe. Every 20 years, there's a bubble. It took me a long time. I'm pretty stupid. Why does this happen every 20 years? I've come to my agreement, but does anybody have their own view as to why there's a bubble in California roughly every 15 to 20 years?
Because the new generation coming.
There it is. People who made money 15 or 20 years ago, or people who lost money 15 or 20 years ago, quickly forget how and why. There's a huge bubble right now in Silicon Valley, and the smart investors have realized this, and they're looking to the continent for better pricing dynamics. That's the nice way to say cheap equity. So people are now looking to invest in Europe. But why? There are two very different mindsets. I've always tried to not be Europeanized, because I'm very proud of being American and Mexican. But I realize I've been here now over 20 years. I think with EBITDA growth. I don't look at growth at any cost. I think I want to have a successful business. I'd rather grow in a controlled fashion than grow crazy or bust. When people look for capital, I think they very frequently forget that only about 18% of the companies that ever look for capital in Silicon Valley, which is the heaven for looking for capital, only 18 succeed. 18%. 82% never get the capital they're looking for. And forget about it if you're outside, even if you're in Nevada or Florida or New York. Northern California is a unique place. But here in Europe, things are actually starting to look better. The Facebook, the tweet, a lot of these big giant unicorns, people have now moved to London, and they're looking to the continent for better investment decisions. And I'm very optimistic and heartened to see that the level of entrepreneurship has really grown in Europe tremendously. And it's very self-serving, but I think a lot of it has to do with cool organizations like Startup Grind and the Founders Institute and other organizations of this ilk that are helping to improve the quality of pitches, as well as to guide people, because right now there's also a big giant boom in people who want to be entrepreneurs who really shouldn't be entrepreneurs. If people do wake up in the morning and you're leading a company and you do not want to sell, get out of the business as fast as you can, because you're going to lose your money. You have to love to sell and embrace lack of stability.
This uncertainty.
This uncertainty, this an appetite for risk.
Exactly.
is something that you have to accept. And in my company, I've gone for 3 or 4 years. I raised, still pretty early on in my career, about $650 million to buy a company. And I got together with about 4 people. The 5 of us raised about $650 million and bought a company and sold it 2 or 3 years later. Nobody had a clue who we were, and I found it amazing that we were able to do this. And yet, with this comes, I took a big chunk of money, started to invest, and I lost it all. And the reason I'm telling you this, Elena, is there are, what do you call it, feast or famine. Sometimes there's really great years, and they'll keep you alive for 4 or 5. But there are a lot of in-between years where you're really, really suffering, and you never know whether or not the next big boom's going to come. So it's very lofty, very up and down. If you're not used to this, you really should get out of the business of being an entrepreneur, because this is the life of the entrepreneur. And I love those maps where you see the growth of the company steadily. I laugh at that because it's usually up and back and all over, down and over the place. If people tell you otherwise, it's usually not true. It's really hard to grow a company.
I was wondering, since we touched about the subject of Europe, do you have some places that you would recommend starting a company in Europe?
I recommend where I know.
Yeah. From your own experience.
From my own experiences, actually, Spain's been a pretty decent place. It's hard to deny the United Kingdom. It's just, its access to capital is the best place in Europe. Berlin's growing like crazy. But then there are these areas where nobody ever hears about. Estonia is doing some really phenomenal stuff, and they're making it easy to set up a residency in Estonia, and they're very investor friendly. Spain has traditionally not been investor friendly for a number of reasons. But when I hear about Poland, for example, and Hungary, I have friends that are starting companies all over the places because there's a lot of incentives by the state, by Brussels, and just the fact that there's been such a long European stability in these markets, which historically have seen a lot of tumultuous times. It really saddens me to hear about Brexit taking place. We've got 7 consecutive years of stability. Why is this going on? I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunities all over Europe, and these are the major ones. The other one, I would say Singapore. But if you're going worldwide, there's a soft place in my heart for Africa. It's always undervalued, and it's growing like crazy. And the wonderful thing about the Africans, and I, again, normally don't like to paint everybody with the same brush, when you make a deal in Africa, and you actually close something there, everybody helps you. Doesn't matter if it's a small deal. The Nigerians, the Ghanaians, the Cote d'Ivoirians, they will sell your company for you. My company, we've not, in the 20 years, 17 years of existence, we have spent exactly 0 money in advertising. Haven't had to. It's all word of mouth, and it's the Africans that really help us out.
Nice. That's really good. And on the other side, one of the other questions that I saw was interesting is that you've told us more about your latest fail or your biggest fail. What can you tell us about your biggest success?
Well, the biggest success was probably closing this deal with buying Stratus Global Corporation. There's a lot of stories there. But actually, did you guys see the picture of me at the very beginning that Doreen picked? Do you guys know Barcelona?
Yes.
At the top of Barcelona, there's a famous fountain in which there's a legend that if you drink from this fountain, you will one day return to live in Barcelona. It's called the Font de Canaletas. And if you ever watch Barca games, whenever Barca wins a big match, this is where they go and they drink so they can repeat their wins. Right?
Is that next to the Arts Museum?
No, it's close to the Plaza Catalunya. It's almost all the way to the top of the Ramblas. Why was I saying this?
Biggest success.
Because of
Biggest success.
yeah, but I can't remember why I said it.
The story behind the fountain.
Well, at the fountain, when you go to this, when you drink from the fountain, you have this legend that you're going to come back and have a success. The reason I brought this up is that you picked a very interesting picture of me, Doreen. I had a lot of hair. A lot of hair back then. And within when we acquired the company, I got sued by 3 different companies for over $300 million each. We were basically, the reason we were able to do this is because my partner is incredibly brilliant, and we identified an opportunity that we knew was going to pay off. This is interesting. We had a client, and this is kind of what I don't want to repeat too much if it's confidential. We had a client that represents a very heavy percentage of our sales. And we've been bothering this client for years, advising them to buy a company. Then this client basically said, okay, if you guys think it's so easy, you go do it. And we basically decided, okay, if you're okay with us doing this, and we recognize we don't ever want to have a conflict with you because you're our most important client. But if you're telling me at a board meeting in front of everybody that we have the blank check to go buy this, we will. So we went out and we raised money, about 650, another 100 million in venture debt, and bought the company. And we did this relatively within 5 months. This was a huge ordeal, and I'd never done anything like this before, so it was a huge deal for me. But funnily enough, we were going to it was going to really shake up the industry, and our lawyer said, you're going to get sued. So the day that you have to come here and learn how to respond, what to say to the press, what not to say to the press, keep the lowest profile, don't let anybody know who you are. And they're going to get 3 days to teach us how to respond when we get sued, right? So we fly to London, and all of us are my 4 partners are from different countries, so we all fly to London. We're in the middle of this course on the 2nd day. When we get notification, we're getting sued. And back then, the reason I mentioned this is if you look at that picture, I have this big hair. Through it, now I have very short hair. And there's a lot of gray. And while it was a fun ride, it was also very emotionally, it took a toll up and down. But this is probably my biggest win, I suppose.
Got it. You've mentioned that you've raised 650 million, right?
Yeah.
How did you end up doing this? I mean, it's a huge amount of money.
It's easier than it sounds, in the sense that we knew exactly what we were going for, and we raised it from a bank that no longer exists.
I wonder why.
For confidentiality reasons, I will not repeat it. But it's one of the big ones, and we got lucky. We got incredibly lucky because we closed the deal on July 31st, 2007. If you remember, if you're old enough, like an old man like me, the capital markets dried up and the financial crisis started August 1st, 2007. And because this bank basically went belly up. So we got lucky that we did it when we did it. 1 week later, we wouldn't have been able to do it. 2 days later, we wouldn't have been able to do it. But it was a special purpose vehicle, an SPV that was created for a very specific purpose, and an expert in the industry recognized that 2 of my partners who were experts, actually, nobody would lend me the money. So what did we do? We actually went out, do you guys know a company called KPN? What's the big telecom company? There's British Telecom, there's Telefonica. KPN is the major telecommunications company for the Netherlands. I hired 2 former CEOs of a multi-billion-dollar company to come sit like you and me and tell them, don't say a fucking word. You're not here to change the company, you're here to look pretty. They were really old and really serious looking people. And of course the markets knew them, Wall Street Journal knew them, they were serious professionals. And they were there to basically give credibility to what we wanted to do. And without them, I would have never been able to do this. And it wasn't me, it was my whole team. And I was basically the treasurer of the team, but we were all able to do it.
So from what you're saying, I understand that there are 2 factors. The first one is timing. And the second one is having some great people next to you that could support you and sit in the room and not say their word.
There's a phrase I like saying, I was sitting on top of the shoulders of giants. These guys were really good. They were very excited about the idea that we came forward with, and they helped us. Without that, I got incredibly lucky to be able to close the deal.
Interesting. You've also mentioned that you already have a mentor for the past 5 years, right?
Yes.
Tell us more a bit about the experience of having a mentor and how would you recommend the people here finding their own mentors in order to grow their companies, grow personally, professionally, and so on?
Well, I was trying to get in touch with my mentor for a while, and he may not even know this, but he wasn't returning my emails. So what I decided to do was, it's a man, by the way, if I didn't say this, and I wrote a poem to this man. Well, I sent this man a poem. And it was a poem that makes fun of Irish Parliament. He's Irish. His secretary got it and immediately called me back and said she could not stop laughing. She was crying and hitting the floor. And I got a meeting with him the next morning at 8 o'clock. So we started to have these, he was the leader of a company that is the largest British employer in Spain. It's a company called Colt Telecom, City of London Telecommunications. And he had about 3,000 employees at his direct reports. And getting time with him is really hard. But he's got to be one of the kindest, nicest guys, intelligent, and in terms of what value did I get, I told him I would love to sit down with him whenever it's convenient to him, and I'm happy to pay him for that time. But what I really found valuable is to find somebody who I trusted intrinsically. He said, do this. And I didn't want to do this. But he came to me and said, listen, I was your age, and I wish somebody would have come to me and told me not to do A, B, C, D, and E. I'm watching you do all of these things. And it cost me years of my life. Stop doing this, 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 and do this. And don't judge me. Just do it. If you've ever seen, this movie, Karate Kid?
Yes.
With Sensei? Wax on, wax off, and the kid doesn't know why this guy's driving him crazy, making these different motions, and he won't explain to him why. He said, just do it. If you don't do it, then fine, leave. If you want me to teach you, do what I say, don't ask. It was kind of this structure, and I had to trust that he was not only looking out for my business development abilities, professional development, but he actually looked at my personal growth. Where I was with my family, where I was with my girlfriend, where I was with my children. Working 100 hours a week is not healthy, but I've been doing it since I was I'm probably working over 50 hours a week since I was 12. I was always working, and I don't sleep, and this is terrible. But anyway, getting back to your point, he was really looking out to help me in many ways that I didn't understand. And which is why, when I had a chance to try to invest in this latest field, taking care of this magazine, that I jumped at the chance to try to do a project with him. And I love this guy, and I will owe him many more years than he can ever know of a great life, because he's helped me. I don't know if that answers the question that you had.
Yeah. And as a segue into the next question is, how would you recommend people to look for a mentor?
Yes.
Or to have a word of advice.
Find somebody who is probably somebody who you think you can never get to, and ask them, connect with them in a way that's very authentic and genuine, and one that they would never expect. And I know hundreds of people want to speak to my mentor. They want his time. They want to ask him for favors. The one thing I told him, I sent him this poem, which was just, I've never sent anybody a poem, let alone another man. And it was kind of an odd thing to do, but it caught his attention. I said, if you come to me and you join my organization, I also lead an organization called the American Society of Barcelona. We're just a bunch of English-speaking expats. We get together to celebrate, have drinks, network, do whatever. I will never speak to you about business. I know everybody wants his time. I won't do that. I want to be the person you come to, who's much younger than you, that you can laugh with, and we can make fun of Irish Parliament all you want. I know nothing about Irish Parliament. But it was a unique opportunity for him to be with somebody who he knew would not ask him for favors other than advice. And trust me, when you get to a point where you're successful, people tend to want to share it. But if they're very successful, They're choosy about making sure that the people they share it with appreciate it. And I think that's one thing that if you can somehow transmit to somebody that you admire or that has skill sets, that you will truly listen to them, even if you don't agree with them, I think you'll probably be surprised how willing people in general are willing to help you. I think a lot of times we forget. I think it's in many people's innate nature to want to be generous and to want to help. And we forget that there are a lot of very successful people have this inside them as well. They're just really hard to get for time. They probably work also 100 hours a week and have pressures beyond what I would ever be able to understand. They want to make sure whoever they spend that time with appreciates it. Does that?
Yes, and speaking of help, I believe we have a lot of people building their own companies or trying to build their very first own companies. I was wondering, how can you help some of the people here? What are some areas of expertise that you can help some people with?
Well, you say expertise, that's a pretty high chinning bar. I really wouldn't consider myself an expert in
Let's say knowledge.
Well, I started a company to help people sell in the United States.
Yeah.
I have a small import-export business that I created, and what we do is we buy machinery, industrial machinery in Europe and the United States, and we resell to Latin America and Africa. But one of the things that I realized when I was doing this is there's a lot of companies that want to sell to the United States and don't know how. And it's incredibly competitive and very intimidating. But you know what? It's actually not that hard in many cases. You just need to have somebody who can partner with you to help you do this, to take this journey. Some cities and countries have export development agencies that hold your hand and they'll set up meetings for you in different parts of the cities. Spain does this. And it's been wonderful business for me because they do this horribly. They will set up meetings for you. It sounds great. You know, say you set up your own company and you want to sell in California, or you want to sell in the United States, and you have big clients in California, Florida, Texas, and Massachusetts, and they will set up these meetings for you. If you haven't been to the United States, it's a big country. And so they will set up a meeting for you. They won't tell you that you're going to have to fly to 6 different places on the corner of the United States. So it's actually quite easy to compete against them because their model is very good. But I will set up a meeting for you with 10 companies in Florida, or 10 companies in Las Vegas, or 10 companies in New York City, and explain what sectors are actually buying your product. There's a lot of help for this, and this is something that I guess my company does. And I have partners in the United States who are much better at this than I am. I just happen to be a partner in this company. So if you need a go-to-market strategy, sometimes what people very often forget in Spain is, for example, if you want to sell to the US government, it's a great client to have. Very hard to get. Unless you know somebody who already sells to the US government. Why don't you partner with these people for a year, 2 years, while you go through the process of becoming an official supplier to the US government. So you actually start selling, you develop traction, and decide whether or not you want to do this without a huge investment. Something else that I think is actually very useful and nobody's doing. If you want to sell to the United States, the US has tremendous incentives to help small companies sell within the United States. But it's hard to get how to get your product there. Well, if you have somebody who's willing to, if you set up a company in the United States and 21% of the equity in that company in the United States is owned by a US citizen, you automatically qualify as a US company for the many millions of incentives that are out there. So I have a small company that helps Spanish companies, because I live in Spain, to set up an opportunity in the United States and to grow there, to start selling to local suppliers. Also, Americans like selling to other Americans. So they see a company that's based in Miami, they're probably much more willing to buy from them than if it's a Spanish company or a French company or a Moldovan company. They just know. There's bigger trust factor. It's kind of silly because it doesn't matter. You could be completely Moldovan and live there, but if you're not registered there, they won't buy from you. And anyway, to answer your question, there are companies. I have one that helps other organizations sell to the United States. And there are different strategies in there, and I think I'm okay with helping companies advise them on how to do that in the US.
Okay. So another question that I like is, what have you learned about sales at your current company?
In my current company.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Sales is retail. It's going out, and you hear this all the time, but it really makes a big difference. And since I'm having a hard time, I'm struggling with this myself, is productizing what we have to offer. I think going out and identifying a niche market, you hear it all the time, and sometimes it's easy to get distracted because people will offer you from different sectors. If you're not very focused on who your buyer is or how to reach them for the desire to reach this big audience, you miss. Somebody says, see the forest for the trees. Sometimes you just got to go for the trees. This is the tree that I want to be at, and this is the one that I know how to sell to. Stay focused on these, and particularly within tech startup companies, there's always the desire to raise capital. I was talking to 2 companies earlier today, and one of the things that I really would like to transmit, what I've seen a lot of, in Barcelona I've been probably about the last 10, 15 years, trying to help early stage companies get access to capital so they can grow in the United States. And I realized over these years that sometimes that's a big mistake. What they really need is to sell. They focus on, if I get capital, then I'll be able to sell. I can scale my team, I can sell. And that's usually not really how it works. So what I've learned is really focus on who exactly your buyer persona is and sell like crazy to that person. And once you can demonstrate, you get credibility. And also for venture capitalists, I've seen many models where there's 2, 3, 4 sources of revenue streams. They don't want to see that. They want to see you be extremely good at one thing. If you start doing 2 or 3, it gets exponentially complex to do those 2 or 3 things well. They'd rather see you and get the trust that you know what you're doing with one thing, and then they will help you scale it. Okay?
Yeah. And another question from the audience is what would be your advice then starting your first company or starting your first startup? What would you recommend focusing on, or what would you think that some people fail and it would be great to be more attentive to the details?
All right, there's one thing that I've seen over and over again in Barcelona.
Okay.
I don't know if this happens in Chisinau.
Let's see.
Think big. Really big. Well, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to start a company if you have an appetite to take over the world, think like you're going to take over the world. But be incredibly honest with your clients, with your investors, and with your family. Because if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you want to start a company, it takes a lot of time, it puts a lot of stress on whoever you're with, and sometimes we forget that on this journey, these are the people who really support us, and these are the people, if your life is about growing a company, but not growing your family and taking care of the people who really matter to you, you're going to suffer on both sides. And so they got to know that they're there, that you are there for them as much as you are for your own clients. But thinking big is where I've seen a lot of companies in Barcelona really want to sell to the Spanish market. They should be thinking Europe, they should be thinking the United States, or even better, globally. I don't know if that's the one thing that I would say is think much bigger than most companies that I see do.
Got it. And in terms of, I'm also wanting to find out more about yourself personally. Two questions I have is, the first one is, what are some of the habits that you developed over the past couple of years that you are really proud of?
So I'm really
Or something that you think is good for you or for your health, your family, your friends, or whatever.
okay. Well, I was talking to you earlier. I've developed a superpower.
Yeah.
In Barcelona, the person who does the fireside chats almost always ends with a similar question. What superpower? Everybody has a superpower. What is yours? And I never really thought about it this way, but I've developed a very interesting capability that when I fly somewhere, I make sure I'm one of the first persons to board the flight. I always fall asleep before the door closes. I always do that, and I wake up when we land. It's a silly thing to be proud of, but since I sleep so little, this is something that been very helpful for me. Something more applicable to other people is I didn't realize, as soon as I started to learn about the power of digital marketing, I realized how little I knew. The more I learned, the more I realized how little I know. So if you can, find people who are a lot smarter than you, rely on them, and trust them. Delegate as much as you can to people who really are behind you, and don't worry about failing. If you have a chance to fail as fast as you possibly can, because you will learn. There's nothing like losing money to make sure that you've learned the lessons that you need to learn for the next one. And if you fail, use it as a learning advice, and don't worry about other people judging you because you failed. I fail all the time, and hopefully I learn from most of them. Sometimes I don't, but sometimes usually I do.
And probably, and speaking of fails and success, probably my last question would be, is if you have any, if you've made any recent acquisitions of $100 or less that have significantly improved your life.
My life, whoa. I would say, well, right now I'm dedicating so much time to sales. I've started to use some scraping technology to identify how to be better at using LinkedIn, Instagram, anything that helps automate the process of identifying clients.
Are you using Phantom Blaster? Are you using Phantom Blaster?
No, I am not,
Okay.
but I have thought about it. There's a number of tools. There's a small startup in Barcelona, and I'll give them a quick plug.
Okay.
They're called Find That Lead.
Yeah.
If you have a chance to use Find That Lead, these bastards are so good, they're so nice, they're so helpful, and they give a lot of great growth hacking advice. I love them. If I have a chance, I would sell them at any point in time, and if they want me to help them raise capital, I'd be delighted to do it.
Yeah, and for the ones that don't know, Find That Lead is a company that helps you find emails of people from their LinkedIn profiles. Basically, the software is helping you scrape LinkedIn profiles depending on the criteria that you want. For example, like location, or title, or companies, or size of the companies, industry, and so on. And then you find a list of, for example, 10,000 people on LinkedIn, and then you can easily scrape their own email addresses. It's highly useful, especially when trying to sell to US, because in EU you can't do this anymore. Sorry, GDPR. But it's a great company to work. It's a great company to work with, and other alternatives that I used before are Hunter.io, also really great tool, or Scrap.io, or there is also Phantom Blaster that I really recommend to give it a try.
They gave a tour, and they mentioned all of these in their growth hacking seminar.
Especially that they found a way to use the Phantom Blaster for free, but it's a bit complicated. I just would like to say thank you to everyone for being here, and let's just give a round of applause to Victor for being here.